I like to consider when I am thinking about my nutrition for performance in HYROX. The first thing is how many meals I'm going to eat, how frequently, and what the composition of those meals are going to be. The second is my own body composition and how I like to track things and figure out where the optimal place is for me to perform. The third is where I put my meals in terms of timing for pre and post and what those meals look like. And the fourth consideration is when to add and eliminate specific elements of lifestyle. For me, this comes down to sugar and alcohol. So there are several different things that we can talk about with nutrition. It's a big slippery slope, but these are the practices that I use to perform my best in HYROX. So what seems to work best for me is about 6 to 7 kind of times eating per day. Morning is going to be almost the exact same. So when I train, I either train before breakfast or kind of like mid-afternoon. So a lot of these meals kind of work around that. So breakfast is almost always avocado toast with yogurt and protein powder to supplement the protein intake on that. Second meal is going to be something, again, pretty easy to digest, usually peanut butter jelly on like sourdough, and it's cottage cheese maybe, or sometimes just chicken. Side of chicken, maybe I'm onto something. Might not be the traditional pairing, but peanut butter jelly, side of chicken, hits all the spots. Then I work around my pre and post, which I will talk about a little bit more in detail a little bit later on. And then after that, I usually have some sort of, we could be at dinner time at that point, which is usually something that is something more starch-based with protein supplementation in there, like not supplementation, with protein in there, like usually it's ground turkey, sometimes chicken, but usually some sort of lean white meat. And then I finish off with just a protein powder pudding, which is just like a little bit of water mixed in with protein powder. It's delicious. It's a great like kind of dessert kind of way to cap my day and just make sure I'm hitting the protein numbers. So as I'm going through this, I realized that it's like a lot of dairy. It's almost like every single meal is there's some sort of dairy in there, and it just works for me. Dairy is easier to digest. It has a good amount of protein in there, so it does help get those numbers up, and also has carbohydrates and fats in there as well, depending on what the dairy source is. Now, mine are pretty low in fat, so again, it's just easy to digest, and so it's good to have pre-workout, post-workout. It's faster absorbing, and it just works for me. I've never really taken dairy out, so maybe there is some benefit to testing that and seeing if I have any absorption issues with it or whatever it is, any type of like inflammation or any type of like GI, but generally I feel good, and it's to me, it's like the best way to hit my numbers and working with something that feels good. When it comes to like numbers, right? I mentioned that just now, and I'm not necessarily tracking. I've tracked macros for almost like religiously for several years, and I haven't been doing that in the past 2 or 3 years. Once I feel like I've gotten the skill down enough that I kind of know where everything is in terms of the daily intake, and just making sure my calories are in place and undulating the amount of volume that I'm eating based off of the work that I'm doing. And again, that was practice that I put in place where I was tracking quite a bit, but I don't track very often, almost at all anymore. But it doesn't mean I'm not like tracking how I'm like feeling and making sure that my body composition is in the right place. But I have a different system for that now that I think works a little bit better for me in this phase. Is weigh myself every single day. And I started this practice probably like 2016, so coming up on 10 years or so. And I was doing it as a practice with counting my macros, right? So we can kind of like adjust things along the way, depending on how the weight is going. But I found that it is helpful to understand like my output versus my intake without needing to be too specific about measuring my food and making sure every single calorie is accounted for, because the end product, my body composition, is really what it matters the most. So when the first time I played around with weighing myself often was in college, and I would weigh myself every Wednesday, and I'd put a lot of weight on this one specific moment. At the time, I was having some body comp issues, some just nutrition issues, like a whole lot of tough eating stuff going on at that point in my life. And when I put this weight on myself on every Wednesday, it became like a failure if it wasn't in the way that I wanted to see it. And what I found is that once a week just isn't enough. It's like there's a lot of factors at play when things can kind of go up and down. So like it could be down like the day before and then it's up on Wednesday, or vice versa, and you're not getting the full story. So weighing myself has been very important part of my process. And if I understand that like there can be a bit of like a complex that forms from it, and I experienced that like I just said, but it's just data, and taking that data and understanding how, like, why it turned out that way, and being able to manipulate it and then take that data and then change the inputs has been very, very helpful, and way that's stressful throughout the day, so I'm not like so heavily like analyzing everything that I eat. In terms of body composition, I've gone up and down and figuring out like what would be the best spot for me. I've done 2 different bulk cycles, 2 different cut cycles along with those, trying to gain mass, trying to lose fat. And there doesn't really seem to be like a sweet spot. In my opinion, the least amount of body fat while you're still as strong enough to move all of the weights is going to be ideal, right? Like the less non-usable weight you're carrying, the better. And I know there's an argument like mass moves mass, so if you have more, you can move it, but to me, it's like then that should be muscle mass. So I think being a little bit leaner is definitely helpful in HYROX, and where that balances out, like how big versus like how much muscle versus not, I'm not quite sure. I've gone up and down, and I seem to be racing at my best when I'm lean and maybe 2 or 3 pounds lighter than where I have been in the past. So that's kind of where but the body composition thing is it's very interesting, and it's what's awesome about this sport is that there is no one specific way, and so there's not like a pressure to be one specific way. So I think that just like whatever was working best for me at the time is the best way to do it. But that's really what I work on when in terms of trying to figure out the best way to optimize my body composition, is making sure I'm taking the data that I have and applying it appropriately. Other ways that I like to optimize is my pre and post workout nutrition, which I've played around with a lot, and I have some favorite practices, favorite strategies, favorite products. And post workout is where I rely heavily on sports nutrition. So I want to focus on ease of use, ease of consumption, and just things that I know are going to digest well for me. So today's a quality session, so I am being a little bit more particular about what I'm eating in and around. So I usually take my last like real hard meal, like full meal, about 90 minutes before, and that is, again, something that's super easy. Today's just gonna be a Go Bar from BPN, and oftentimes I'll supplement with some G1M Sport, which is just some carbohydrate electrolyte mix, which is really easy to digest and just gets things through your system and just gives you good, like, solid energy all the way through. So this is kind of my pre-workout routine. Very low in fat, pretty low in protein, and mostly focusing on easy to digest carbohydrates. The timing, like I said, is about 90 minutes. If I'm just doing some G1M Sport and nothing more solid, it would be even less. Like I could sip on G1M Sport basically up until the moment I start. For post-workout, I like to have something like this Rego by Science and Sport. Something that is a carbohydrate protein mix. This also has electrolytes in there as well, and also potentially supplementing with some creatine in post. So this is important just so that I can get that carbohydrate in there and the protein in there right away. And it's really important for me to get the post-workout in as quickly as possible so that I don't fall behind on calories. There is kind of like they talk about this window that exists. I don't necessarily know if that exists in terms of like being optimal. It seems to be optimal more for muscle growth, but in terms of recovery, when you get your food in matters. If you have like a second session that day, but generally if you're getting in enough food, your body will absorb it. So I've found that try to get in some calories directly after, just so that I can keep up with my caloric needs throughout the day. So usually I have something like this, and then I will have some sort of more solid meal directly after. So For the quality workout today, I will make sure to add a YouTube short, kind of going over what the workout is. It's about 3 weeks out, 2.5 weeks out. I actually don't know, from Scotland. So this is like a last big session. So if you're interested in some of the details, make sure you're checking out all the way at the end. I'll have it like the end credits for a YouTube short for what the next aspect of performance nutrition, and it's sugar content and alcohol consumption. So let's just start with the sugar content part. In general, sugar is going to be a performance booster. But for me, when it comes to my actual diet, I draw a line, especially when I'm like particularly locked in at like refined sugar, and mostly like dessert type snacks or anything that is just like a delightful treat, right? Like anything that is going to be more or less habit forming. So I try to pull those things out. If I am consistently having some different like cookies or chips or snacks or whatever it might be, that habit is just kind of like a cycle. And so when it comes time to want to kind of dial things in a little bit tighter, and mostly for me, it's from a body composition standpoint. I don't necessarily think that sugar is going to be detrimental to performance in any way. Whatever you think about how it's processed, blood sugar, a bunch of different things, inflammation, there might be some effects there, but in general, it's just like, if I'm going to try to get my body composition in the best possible place for race day, like I need to take out these habits that might be setting me back slightly. So I try to pull those things out. And not for a long time. I think like 2 weeks is a really good amount of time there. The first week is kind of hard. So maybe kind of pushing things back for me anyway. I have that drawing, I have that pulling toward these like sugary snacks or just like this like kind of treat more mentality, and pulling those things out just kind of helps more center what is going to be valuable for me with my nutrition choices. So again, I don't think it's inherently bad. And when I'm talking about sugar, it's like refined sugars, like added sugars to things. Of course, like natural sugars are just going to happen. Of course, carbohydrates can be, considered sugars or whatever. So in terms of sugar, like that's how I kind of like take this mindset, right? Like that there's time and place. And if there is going to be it's going to be like once a week. This is where like a kind of like that cheat meal idea comes in. For me, that just is like the easiest way to make sure that I'm doing what I can do from a body composition standpoint. So alcohol is another thing when it comes closer to race events that I just completely cut out. And I like to have, I think 4 weeks is a good spot. 6 weeks is ideal. 6 weeks is pretty hard. But if I can get 2 full weeks of no alcohol, like not a drop of alcohol, I just feel so much better. And I've played around with this for a long time. I've carried quite a bit of dissonance when it comes to alcohol in the past, just because I really enjoyed it. It was a big part of my life for a long time. And I just thought like I could do both, right? I could have alcohol and often in excess, more often than not in excess, and still like be able to be an athlete and to be able to perform well. But I had just like some issues with it, and not issues that are so like weighty that I felt like my world was going to fall apart, or it's like, if I don't stop this, I'm going to lose everything. It was everything like that, but it was definitely to the point where it was stopping me from being the person who I wanted to be and being able to reach my full potential as an athlete and just as like a person in general. So I came to that realization just a couple of years ago, and it's really helped give me clarity on what matters. Where before I was like, I could do it all. I could have both the things. And I just can't. Like, it doesn't work that way. And if I'm going to be serious about my body composition, about my nutrition, about my training, then alcohol there's no place for it. There's truly no place for it. And I think there's definitely something to be said about stress relief and just like the social aspect of things. But it's just a drug that is hard to like to harness, right? Once I'm in it, it's hard to kind of stop. So I just make sure that when I have these hard lines, these hard boundaries, it just makes it way easier and gives me way more confidence. So for me, if I'm going to be a serious athlete, like that can't be part of it. But I do really enjoy it, right? Like I will consume alcohol, like in crafty stuff, like stuff that is just like kind of snotty, snobby, I should say. And just like that I really like, and it's part of my life still. So I feel like I can have it still in my life, but it just needs to be kind of periodized. And I kind of think of it as periodization in terms of lifestyle, is like there's points during the year where my intensity and training is high, and there's points during the year that my alcohol consumption and sugar consumption is low, right? And it doesn't need to be you can't be high intensity all year for training, and I can't be just like low alcohol, no alcohol, low sugar all year. So those things I think are really important for me when it comes to the performance aspect of things, and wanting to make sure that I'm doing all the things that I can within my control.